and welcome back to the Citizen channel. Hope you're all staying safe and well. And today we've got a managing City feature, of course. And we're going to have a look at a certain, Leslie Mark Hughes, or better known as Mark Hughes. Of course, why didn't he go with his first name? Nothing wrong with Leslie, it's a good name. We're going to have a look at Mark Hughes' relatively short stay at City, or the City of Manchester Stadium at the time, wasn't it? I think it was called, or Eastlands, we like to call it. Of course we did. So we're going to have a look at that today. Please, if you are new to the channel, push that subscribe button, push the bell notification. All these vlogs are coming out, do everything City past, present and forever, of course. Tell your friends as well, your City supporting friends, that'd be great. And if you can give an old City fan a like, a thumbs up, whatever, that'd be much appreciated. And your support is, as always, much appreciated. Yes, 2nd of June 2008. We got rid of a guy called Sven-Göran Eriksson. I've not done a manager's City on him yet. I'm sure there will be one day. And there was also interest, apparently, for Mark Hughes from Chelsea. They just recently sacked their manager, Avram Grant. And Blackburn confirmed on the 2nd of June that they'd agreed to allow City to talk to Hughes. And the following day, it was agreed, a compensation package. Someone said it was a world record at the time, probably not now, obviously, to take Mark Hughes over, and we paid him a few quid. Let's say that. We won't quote figures, but we paid him a few quid. And he was appointed as City manager on the 4th of June 2008 on a 3-year contract. He wasn't going to quite see that one out. I think key to Hughes' arrival, obviously we had another new arrival at a sort of board at the top level, if you like, executive chairman in Gary Cook, of course, who would become synonymous and famous and infamous for various things over the coming years. But and also current City owner Mr. Thaksin Shinawatra, who obviously had problems of his own. He was quite key apparently, and he liked the cut of Hughes' jib, if you like, so he was sort of involved in that as well. Heart overhead from a personal point of view. My little view on this, I never ever want a United player managing City. It's a heart overhead thing. I'm not saying Mark Hughes couldn't have been a decent manager, but as in the Steve Coppell cock-up over 10 years previously, it's just something I don't like, and I think any City fans of my age probably think the same. Whether is it the same now, I'm not too sure, but certainly fans of my age, I didn't really want it. But hey, we have to suck it and see, as they say. His arrival at Carrington, apparently there was still a Save Sven petition up on the board, which is a bit tactful, to say the least. But he's a rugged Welshman, Mark Hughes. I don't think he took that too much to heart. And he had an early chance, didn't he, to test City. We were, of course, celebrating or playing European football, which we loved at that time. I mean, even to get in the UEFA Cup through for the Fair Play League, which is what we did, was absolutely marvellous. I remember that game where Robbie Fowler failed to score with a penalty in the last minute, and he denied us a European spot. I was absolutely gutted. It was only UEFA Cup, but it's levels, isn't it? That's the levels we're talking at. So, of course, we had a chance to play against those European giants, the Faroe Islands, E.B. Straymore, is it? So we had a chance to set his wits against that. And like Hughes, Cook was still finding his feet at City, and I think both of them must have looked at the foibles and the typical City thing, because obviously we had to play the home leg at Barnsley for this. Didn't have to play it, but I mean there's obviously other locations, but it ended up at Barnsley anyway, which is a bit weird to say the least. The home leg, because obviously the City of Manchester Stadium, Eastlands, was still recovering from a Bon Jovi concert, I think. So I don't think the pitch was up to it. So we literally had to do that. So we didn't have probably would have played at the Thingy Stadium now, with the across the road that we've got, but we didn't have it then. So there you are. If Cook and Hughes wanted any introduction as to City's machinations, that was a good idea. Fortunately for Hughes, and it was fortunate, the spotlight was taken off him, really, because obviously Thaksin Shinawatra, we've already mentioned, was facing lots of problems. There's lots of financial problems with City. We're having to get loans and stuff like that. And of course, Mr. Cook was taking all the media attention, so it did allow Hughes to sort of get on with his job, which was good in a way for him as well, without too much fuss. Fuss, of course, but certainly not as much as he probably would have got otherwise. And he wasn't impressed. He wasn't impressed with the setup for a big club. Obviously, we've moved to the Eastlands, we moved to the City of Manchester Stadium, which in itself was okay, but it's the facilities, the training facilities, of course. We had the Carrington set up, but that was far from ideal. But he never said, he was never ever sorry for joining the club, and he deserves credit because, as on the pitch, he was getting on fairly well with the job, considering the limitations he realised that we had at City. Despite losing, of course, to old midget land, I was actually doing a 2-week health thing, one of these medical health things where you're a guinea pig at that time, because I actually watched the second game, which we won on penalties while I was in this hospital. AstraZeneca, is it? Yeah, in there. So that was quite unusual. But yeah, despite losing to Midgetland in front of 17,000 at the City of Manchester Stadium, I was at that one. I had a chance to get to that one before I went on this health thing. Our first league game away at Villa, we lost that as well. But then we won 5 out of 6. So it wasn't doing too bad with mainly an inherited team. And of course, he did bring certain things. He did cheer the fans. You know, he was a United player. He had to sort of get the fans on his side, didn't he? And obviously we had the return of Sean Wright-Phillips at that time. Perhaps weren't overly excited by a guy called Joe. We weren't really bothered. Interesting. We had a bit of fun with it, of course we did. But we also added, of course, future legends and soon would be legends, of course, Company and Zabaleta. And the fans would have been happy. All this trouble with taxing Sinatra, it would known that the negotiations going on with Sinatra to sell it. He only wanted to sell about 40% of the club, but eventually I think he would agree to sell 90% eventually. But of course, if we'd known that Middle East investors were on the way, we would have been pretty chuffed by that as well. But at that stage, we weren't really aware of it, and Mark Hughes wasn't aware of it. When the news of the takeover was breaking, all sorts of players, of course, were being linked with City. Comically, there was a City golf thing going on the final day of the transfer season. So Hughes was actually interviewed in his golf wear on the golf course, which just shows how much input he was having to all these so-called players coming to City. And of course, it turned out Robinho perhaps was the biggie, wasn't it? And of course, I can imagine Hughes' involvement was quite minimal on that basis. But one immediate benefit, of course, was Khaldoon was over at City, over at the Eastlands, went over to Carrington, and Mark Hughes had the ability and the chance to take him round and showing the facilities and highlight what we needed and what we didn't have, and that was great. And this was all taken back, of course, to Sheikh Mansour, and changes that could be made quickly were started immediately, and others obviously were planned for in the future, but stuff started to be actioned. So Mark Hughes had a big involvement and was quite happy with that. And within weeks, we had a new and improved gym at the Carrington Training Centre, and so much more, as we know, would follow, even in Mark Hughes' short time there. There were plenty of coming and goings, of course, as far as behind the scenes, but Hughes was, again, as I said, was allowed to get on with the football side. But despite the positivity off-field, which there was, I mean, as fans, we were absolutely cock-a-hoop with this thing, with this takeover. We were doing okay in Europe, but we were dropping sadly down the league, and that's what mattered more. After defeat at West Bromwich Albion on the 21st of December, we sat 18th in the Premier League. Only 20 teams, don't forget, so we're in the relegation spot, which wasn't good. But Khaldoon was seemingly still fully behind Hughes. I mean, he inherited a team. He accepted that a lot of this team wasn't Hughes' choice. So he would back him, of course. We had the January transfer window to come. So in came players like Bellamy, Bridge, Santa Cruz, that he'd obviously had at Blackburn, hadn't he? And Shay Gibbon, of course, obviously to sort of steady the defence, if you like. And Hughes, more than anything, I think was very influential in bringing the lesser known, if you like, but very important player, Nigel de Jong, of course, to City as well. And the purchases improved things, as you'd expect they would. And the season progressed. We had an outside chance as it got to the end of the season of finishing top 7 and qualifying for Europe. But 10th place finish, as it turned out at the end, was not seen as a total disaster. And we managed to get to the quarterfinals of the UEFA Cup as well. And at least this raised City's profile in Europe a little. On the footballing side, obviously, everyone in Europe knew money bags and stuff like that. And we're getting criticism them, of course. But at least on the football side, we reached a reasonable level and people started to know who Manchester City were again. Hughes, of course, was strengthened strengthened for the 2009-10 season, and the first biggie, of course, we all remember the big poster was bringing Carlos Tevez to Eastlands. This was followed by Adebayor, Gareth Barry, Julian Lescott, and Kolo Touré, of course. With this, though, of course, the pressure would ramp up. This was going to be, if you like, starting to be Hughes' players now. And he was left in no doubt that the season would be deemed a failure if City didn't get 70 points. at that stage, and a top 4 finish. This was the sort of targets given to him, and Hughes was actually being served notice. Let's be fair about this. Fair or unfair, the City hierarchy had backed Hughes and now expected him to start delivering. It was to start so well. Yeah, it started well for him. Adebayor, Tevez, the new signings, in amongst the goals. The City opened with 4 victories. He's sort of managed to sneak out Dunny, but not too much consternation. He managed to get rid of Richard Dunn at that stage and brought in Kolo Touré as captain. So he did one little thing that, say, lost track of how many Player of the Years Richard Dunn won, but at that stage it probably was a reasonable thing. I don't think he got too much stick, certainly not from me, from other City fans either. And despite some setbacks for Hughes, he's managed to keep City in and around the target of the top 4. Yes, we were sort of in line. If you look at the games played and how many points we had, of course, as we started off, it looked as though 70 points was doable. So it all started off so very, very well. And we're actually progressing in the Carling Cup. Which was obviously the name for the League Cup then. On December the 2nd, a 3-0 home win over a very young Arsenal side. I remember watching this and looking at these Arsenal young lads with all these fancy boots and having a bit of a laugh at them, because obviously they were just kids. But, I mean, probably that's how it is. I thought it was a bit ironic at the time in those days. And, of course, a 3-0 win put us into the semi-finals of the competition. But the big problem there for Hughes was we'd had a run of 6 consecutive league draws, so which was making it harder to stay, of course, in striking distance of the top 4. And we were certainly became a little bit behind our 70-point target for the season. Perhaps that's an excuse that we needed. It certainly would be, obviously, within the next month or so. Interesting enough, there was something in the air, perhaps at that Carling Cup match, although obviously it was over 2 weeks before it, and the way things were done, it probably wasn't. But obviously Hughes was always very animated in his technical area, but that night particularly, it was like a bear being annoyed by a wasp in that technical box, and it certainly annoyed Arsene Wenger, the Arsenal manager at the time. And he was certainly affected by Hughes' aggressive touchline behaviour, he called it. We can perhaps understand his frustration, Wenger, at being beaten by the team that perhaps poached Adebayor and Touré. But having said that, he played his kids anyway, so it wouldn't have really mattered, would it? But Arsene Wenger stormed off down the tunnel after the match without shaking hands. Hughes said there's a certain protocol you should go through. You should have been a little bit more gracious, he said. Wenger said, I'm free to shake hands with whoever I wish. There you go. Perhaps Hughes knew something we and Wenger didn't. It's just over 2 weeks later, despite booking a semi-final place in the Carling Cup, which was our first semi-final spot since 81, I think, at the time, he will be gone. But unbeaten. Of course, we're unbeaten. Apart from that Fergie time 4-3 at Old Trafford, lost City, we were actually unbeaten, but again, Cook and Khaldoon, we were drawing too many games, and Khaldoon and Cook saw this as points lost more than a point gained. So I think the die had been cast to search for a new manager. On the 16th of December, a 3-0 defeat at Spurs, and remarkably, only our second defeat of the season, seemed to be the final straw, of course, but it'd all been planned a little bit before this. Hughes would be sacked after the game following a home game with Sunderland, and Roberto Mancini was the man lined up to take over, of course. Hughes was informed on the morning of the Sunderland game that Khaldoon was coming in to have a meeting with him after the match. Yes, I think even at that stage, perhaps Hughes knew something. But despite City's best efforts to keep things quiet, and a sort of something leaked out, didn't it? I think that the Sun was the first to speculate or get this information. And for once, they were probably correct. And speculation was rife that this was to be his last game. And of course, someone would be a new manager. Mancini was a little bit down the list of all. Mourinho was quoted, stuff like this. But I think Mancini came around eventually, but initially he was sort of well down the list. Despite all this, Hughes, to his total credit and to his backroom staff, knowing he was a dead man walking, which he was, led City to one final victory, of course, although it wasn't easy. I think we were 2-0 up and 3-2 up, and it went to 3-3, but we beat Sunderland 4-3 on the day, on the 19th of December. Of course, before his meeting, I think it was delayed as well, Khaldoon. So it was all a bit of a disaster, and his contract, though, was terminated with immediate effect after the game, and his reign had lasted just 18 months. Yep, City have decided to part ways with Hughes on or around the 28th of November. I think once there was no guarantee of top four, once this 70 points was looking a bit dodgy, I think they were very quick to jump to that conclusion if he had to go. I think they wanted that excuse. They gave him that tough target at the start of the game, which in fairness, as a business, as a club, is fair enough. As a personal thing, perhaps not. But obviously, yeah, 28th of November, six in the run of 6 draws, of course, and before the 3-0 Arsenal winning the FA Cup. I think it had been done. Perhaps Hughes had sensed something, as I said, that Arsenal game. It perhaps was a little bit more tetchy than he would have normally been. Perhaps he could tell from the contacts he was getting from people like Cook that something was in the air. We'd offered the position to Mancini apparently on the 17th of December, the day after that Spurs defeat, although Mancini said they were chatting before that, which is obvious. Not just going to turn up and offer it him on the day, are they? So, even though City got stick for that, it was bound to happen. Mancini was announced, of course, the following Monday after this last Sunderland game. On the 19th of December. And of course, as I said, City took stick rightly or wrongly for this, but other so-called big clubs had done worse, but it was City, of course, who were accused of lacking class. Throughout it all, there's no doubt that Mark Hughes himself had shown class. I think he took, superbly. At the time, I haven't got any sort of paper things, but at the time, I think he just shown class throughout it all. And City, as he'd done before and done since, tried to go about things in a sort of correct sort of way that benefited the club, of course. It was the club, it was the actual start of this wonderful takeover, the start of this new organisation. So they tried to do things the right way as far as the club was concerned. But typical City from a PR perspective, it wasn't a great result. Hughes, of course, will take a small break from football and become the Fulham manager the following July. So he had a good little break. Nice Christmas. I'm sure it didn't get him down too much. As I say, another job was round the corner, as it always is for these managers. His record for City, played 77, won 36, drawn 15, lost 26. So not too bad. I mean, their win rate of 47%, which is quite high compared to other City managers over the years. 129 goals scored and 101 let in. There we go. Thanks for joining me for this little look at managing City and the time that Mark Hughes was there from the 4th of June 2008 to the 19th of December 2009. So I think just slightly over 18 months. Please let me know your memories of Mark Hughes. As I said, I don't have anything bad to think about Mark Hughes. As I said from the initial thing, if he's a United player, I don't want him here. I don't think, and obviously circumstances were probably against him as soon as the takeover went. The takeover was announced. He was never going to perhaps be the man that we wanted to lead City on to greater things. So, well, let me know your thoughts anyway. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Please, until we meet again, I only ask you one thing, don't I? Please, stay safe, Blues. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.